Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today, we're gonna jump back into Stories About Kevin and the saga of Kevin in a Big Rig. This series of epic stories has been brought to us by Strong Bad Jr. This is video number 3 in the series. I'll link the other 2 down below. This one is titled Kevin in a Big Rig Part 6 Breakdown. Let's jump right in. Hello again everyone and welcome to another episode of Kevin in a Big Rig. The popularity of this series has grown by leaps and bounds over the last week and a half, and all I can say is wow. I can scarcely believe the amount of support and encouragement I've received from all of you, and I can't begin to tell you what it means to me. The only downside I've encountered is that I have to take extra care so that these stories don't completely suck. I'd like to give a big shout out to the viewers and subscribers of YouTube channel Karma Comment Chameleon. Hey, that's us. I read all comments on both Reddit and YouTube, and your kind words of support are all the inspiration I need to continue this series. And with that, let's get on with Kevin in a Big Rig Part 6 Breakdown. Backstory. This story takes place about a week after the events in Part 5. First, Kevin and I made our delivery in Salt Lake City without incident and took another load north to Seattle, Washington. We had picked up another load that was bound for the East Coast when yet another disaster struck. I had made the initial pickup in Trenton, Washington, and headed east on Interstate 90. Since I had driven half the night before the pickup and into mid-morning, my drive time for the day expired around Tanner, Washington, and first Kevin and I switched out. Ahead of us lay barren and mountainous terrain and nearly 3,000 miles of highway across the northern states of the lower 48. Combine that with the ever-threatening winter storms, first Kevin's horrible driving skills, and a dwindling supply of tolerance on my part, I was beginning to wonder if first Kevin would kill us both before I could get rid of him. At the end of my drive shifts each day, I had been religiously copying the information from the notes I had taken into an email on my phone. I addressed it to my fleet manager and the company's safety director. Using my most professional and courteous language, I outlined everything I had witnessed over the past 2.5 months. I had reached the point where I didn't want revenge or compensation, or even demand he be fired. I just wanted to get away from him. But in order to do that, I needed a valid reason so management would be convinced. One reason? How about 100? First, Kevin took over and proceeded east along Interstate 90 towards Idaho. As was my habit by this point, I rode shotgun upon first leaving out at first. I'm still in the jump seat when we reach Snoqualmie Pass. In my opinion, there are 3 critical skills that all drivers must learn if they want to last long enough in the industry to make any real money: navigation, backing up with a trailer, and going down a long, steep mountain grade fully loaded. Going up a mountain might be slow and arduous. Going down can quickly turn deadly. If a driver doesn't control the speed during the descent, he will find himself behind the wheel of a runaway death machine. To make the situation more difficult, the brakes of the truck can overheat and completely fail if overused, making the loss of control inevitable. If you've ever driven through mountains and seen runaway truck ramps, that's exactly what they are for: a pre-selected crash scene. Most trucks now have a feature called engine brakes, most commonly known to truck drivers as Jake brakes. Unlike the typical wheel brakes, engine brakes cause the truck to slow down by restricting airflow in the engine. This causes the engine to add resistance in the drivetrain and serve as a sort of drogue chute. Also, unlike wheel brakes, engine brakes will not overheat or fail from overuse. When used properly, they can make going down a mountain grade far more efficient and safe. The use of engine brakes also happens to be one of the issues first Kevin and I disagreed upon. While I had been properly instructed by my trainer on how to use the engine brakes effectively, first Kevin was adamantly opposed to them. He wasn't shy about voicing his disapproval of my using them, but there was very little he could do about it. His opinion wasn't due to some rational reason, it was simply because the company's safety department said so. During my orientation, the presenter had made a major issue about how engine brakes weren't that useful and how he wished they wouldn't come with the trucks. I later learned this presenter had a grand total of 1 month of actual driving experience and quit because he couldn't take the hardship. And there we were, myself, first Kevin, a fully loaded truck, and the long, steep decline that was Snoqualmie Pass. Yep, I said to myself, I am definitely regretting my life choices right now. First, Kevin starts down the pass. He was in top gear and the truck begins to accelerate rapidly. Since he's not using the engine brakes, the only way he can control the truck's speed without overusing the wheel brakes is to downshift. In order to do that, he must reduce speed. Shifting gears in a semi is a lot different than a regular car, since a truck transmission will only go into gear if it and engine are at the proper speed for the gear being selected. First, Kevin slams on the brakes, throwing everything in the cab that isn't tied down forward. He tries to downshift, but his timing is off. For a few heart-stopping seconds, the truck is essentially dropping down the side of a mountain in a free fall before First Kevin manages to wrestle the truck into gear with another whiplash brake check and a grinding protest from the transmission. The engine revs up sharply as it fights against gravity and the excess speed for the gear. First, Kevin again applies extremely heavy braking, and I grab the handhold above me and push myself back into the seat to cushion the jolt. At this point, I look over at the dash tachometer. It's reading over 1700 RPM. The normal operating range for this truck is between 1000 and 1500 RPM. Slowing down and reducing the engine speed is vital at this point. Even First Kevin knew that. He does, applying heavy braking again to slow the engine to just under 1500 RPM, and the speed appears to be relatively stable. Then, in a move that I can only describe as divine stupidity, First Kevin forces the transmission into the next lower gear. And when I say forced, I mean the truck was actively fighting him as if it were an animal raging in a trap. The gears of the transmission were grinding so hard, I thought they would be worn down before we reached the bottom of the hill. Eventually, however, First Kevin's stubborn determination won out and the truck went into gear. The truck screamed in protest. I glanced at the tachometer and it's showing close to 2000 RPM, way outside the operating limits. Too much of this and the engine will literally tear itself apart, I knew. What does First Kevin do? Nothing. Damn it, I scream at him, trying to make myself heard over the tortured engine. Slow down. Don't tell me how to drive. First Kevin snaps back. Apparently, he believes this is normal. I swear to God, First Kevin, if you wreck this truck, my sentence was cut off by yet another hard break, and I'm wondering if I can stab this little bastard, take over the truck, and claim self-defense. We went down that long, steep hill for what felt like hours. The screaming engine begged for mercy, and First Kevin was completely oblivious. At any moment, I was expecting the engine to explode in a fiery death, taking us to our own a few moments later, but to its credit, it held on just long enough. We get to the bottom of the hill, and the stress on both the engine and my nerves finally dissipates. At first, I think we dodged yet another bullet. The truck seems to be no worse for the wear, and I managed not to kill First Kevin. At that moment, the dashboard lights up more than the annual Christmas tree at Rockefeller Plaza. Every warning light and alarm buzzer is going off as if we were in a movie helicopter that had just been hit by a rocket. I swear under my breath and begin looking on my phone for repair shops, truck stops, or anywhere nearby where we can get help. And then, as suddenly as it started, the dash goes quiet and the lights turn off. It wasn't a relief, more of the eerie quiet. That's not good, I say, knowing this wasn't some electronic glitch. I go back to my phone. It's the only thing I can do to keep me from snapping First Kevin's neck. By some obscene stroke of luck, there's a dealership service shop at the next exit. It was just then that the dashboard lights and alarms make an encore appearance. I think something's wrong with the truck, First Kevin said, as if I hadn't already worked out that much for myself. I give First Kevin my hardest glare. No crap, Sherlock, I reply. You just fell off an effing mountain and blew the engine up. What do we do? He asked like a lost little boy. I take this moment to highlight his stupidity. I don't know, Super Trucker. You're the one who knows everything. Why don't you tell me? To say my nerves were frayed at this point would be a gross understatement. First, Kevin keeps looking between the road and the dash. I can tell he's lost, confused, and clueless. Just then, the engine derates, essentially limiting its speed and horsepower in order to prevent further damage. Something is seriously wrong, and First Kevin is completely useless. Next exit, I say, there's a dealership shop. First Kevin nods nervously. He rounds a bend and the exit comes in sight. Despite the truck's reduced speed, First Kevin is about to blow right past, something he can't very well afford to do. First Kevin, exit now, I say. Here? He asks, unsure. Now, I scream, not even trying to be civil. First Kevin takes the exit, braking extremely hard again to get slow enough so as to not overturn the truck. I can see the sign for the dealership and guide First Kevin to it. We pull into the parking lot just moments before the truck dies. Charmed life, I think. I turn to First Kevin and say, "You, send dispatch a message, tell them where we are and that we're checking into the shop. I'll go talk to the shop." He doesn't get a chance to protest as I jump out and head inside. The techs run a diagnostic and find a long list of fault codes. I have to coordinate between dispatch and the shop because the company maintenance overseer knew nothing about trucks and First Kevin was completely useless, and find out that the truck will need to be in the shop overnight. They reluctantly agree to spring for a hotel room within walking distance and we go check in. First Kevin and I spent about 3 days in that hotel while the truck was being repaired. First Kevin, by virtue of his short-term memory problems, had completely forgotten about how it was all his doing. He gave some speech about how dangerous engine brakes were, but I reminded him that he was the one who was driving when the truck broke down. He tried to pass the blame, but it didn't matter. I had a more important task to focus on. If you ever needed or wanted to know how to make a rigid corporate structure to act in your favor, you might want to take notes. I had been gathering evidence against First Kevin for about 2 weeks before we broke down. In those 2 weeks, I had been able to gather enough problems against him that would make a district attorney green with envy. I divided my time between copying my notes to email and jotting down new items as they cropped up. It was tedious as the list never seemed to go down, but eventually the email was ready. The only question that remained was who exactly would get the email. Normally, I would simply email my fleet manager like one would a supervisor. The problem was such major issue would need nearly every department in the loop. The only problem was the company was strictly compartmentalized and often territorial. It wasn't uncommon to get messages from 3 or 4 department heads for one minor infraction. For example, when I had to request fuel in Indiana, I had to explain why to the route planning manager, fleet fuel controller, and the planning department in addition to my supervisory fleet manager. Not only was this incredibly ineffective and ineffective, it did provide insight into how the system could be manipulated. For all its segmented nature, there was one department that had full authority over any other. That was the safety department. Since every trucking company must take safety seriously, the safety managers are taken very seriously. More often than not, a safety manager held more power than the CEO and was the one department who could rally the others to a cause. My plan was to send emails to the heads of every department that had jurisdiction over any of First Kevin's violations. Hours of service, planning, human resources, driver training, each department head would get the email. In addition, my fleet manager and the safety manager would get the exact same email. With any luck, one of the emails would trigger an investigation, the findings of which would start a chain reaction. At best, the safety manager would order every department to look into the matter. What I was careful not to do was to come off as accusatory or demanding. My philosophy has been to assume ignorance before malevolence, that is, assume that company simply wasn't aware of what was going on, and if I demanded that First Kevin was fired, I would risk coming across as bitter and spiteful, which would accomplish nothing. No, my emails would be professional, concise, detailed, and presented in a way that would say, "Hey, I found these problems and I wanted to bring them to your attention." The issues themselves would cause the panic. It was during this breakdown that I put the finishing touches on my plan. I dug through the company directory for the relevant emails, organized the documents and photos in the email, and arranged the list of violations by the relevant departments. If and when an investigation took place, all they would have to do is look where I pointed. I had nearly completed the email during the 3-day downtime while awaiting repairs. The day the truck was repaired, First Kevin and I went to the shop a few hours before the truck was released. When the techs told us it was ready, I was surprised First Kevin offered to sign it out and take the first shift of the day. It was uncharacteristically generous of him, which I found suspicious but did not say so. I decided to make a restroom stop before we left out. On the way out of the door, I walked by the service desk. The tech who worked on our trucks was finishing up the ticket and waved me over. "Hey," he said, somewhat bewildered, "aren't you with that short guy with the limp?" "Yeah, why do you ask?" I reply. "Well, he asked a weird question." I take a deep breath. I had a feeling what that question would be. Let me guess. Was he asking about the engine brakes? The tech was taken aback. Yeah, he wanted to know how to disable them. I thought it was weird because why would anybody want to do that? I shake my head in disgust and glance to make sure First Kevin isn't in the room. "Did you tell him?" "Hell no," the tech admitted. "You'd be an idiot not to have them." I nod in agreement. "By the way," I ask, "what was it that was wrong with the truck?" "There was some cracks in the turbocharger housing," he explained. "Uh-huh, and would keeping the engine at 2,000 RPM all the way down Snoqualmie cause that?" He looked at me knowingly. "You better tell somebody about him if he can't drive any better than that." "Oh, don't worry," I assured him. "I will." And that ends part 6, Breakdown. Once again, a big thank you to everyone who is either reading this story on Reddit or listening on YouTube, being brought to you by Karma Comment Chameleon. Hey, that's us again. Your support means the world to me, and I hope this story proves itself worth your time. I will apologize in advance since part 7 will be delayed, as I will be unavailable during the weekend, but hopefully I will be able to post it up early next week. Until next time, this is Strong Bad Jr. reminding you to help control the Kevin population. Have your Kevin spayed or neutered. Well, it appears there's enough infractions that Kevin's gonna be out of that truck probably sooner rather than later. I can't wait to see how it goes down though. So we know now that OP's reading the comments on our videos and the comments on their story as well. So I implore you to check them out at the link in the description down below. Leave a comment for them and let them know just how much you're enjoying their stories. Also, comment down below the video here as well, and I'm sure OP will read them in both places. Thanks again to Strong Bad Jr. for posting these stories to Reddit. We really appreciate your writing. It is amazing, and we're looking forward to more. Check out OP at the links in the description down below. Thanks for watching, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.